Well, I'm Marko Dugonjic. I come from Croatia. I run a small family business, Creative Nights. It's a UX consultancy back home in Croatia. Apart from working for our clients, we also do some web applications. For instance, Typetester, which is online for already for 10 years, and we in fact are planning to launch the next version in a couple of days. My professional background is actually I'm a dropout from kinesiology. I'm an ex-fitness trainer who got interested in accessibility and web standards sometimes in 2000. And since there was very little web designers and web developers in Croatia who actually understood CSS and HTML, and CSS positioning in general, one led to another, and little by little I started designing and developing websites for clients, and they actually pay me money for this kind of engagements. So after a couple of years, I just switched from being a fitness trainer to being web standards developer and designer. Well, although we have 4.5 million people in Croatia, it's very small. It's just double the Barcelona, in population. Nevertheless, we have quite a few web design meetups. So we have a local branch of IXDA in Croatia, which is run by my dear friend Tim Kadic, who also runs events in New York City. And we also have a strong WordPress meetup in Croatia, also run by friends Emanuel and Lucian Blagonic, the Blagonic brothers, very famous brothers in Croatia. And they are also pretty active in the international WordPress community. So we have a couple of meetups, and almost every month you can attend like 3 or 4 gatherings. Well, that's actually a tough question because we still haven't figured it out all the way through. But as Tim Brown says, he's a type manager at Typekit. We have to choose our points and set the limits, and do our best to kind of create acceptable solution with within these boundaries. So basically, for responsive web typography, we have to kind of deal with it in a way to not seek for the perfect solution on one resolution, or for instance on desktop, but to create CSS framework, design framework, so it can actually survive on multiple, on multiple devices in multiple situations. Well, my talks are usually very practical. I always provide some code snippets and some tips how to actually solve a problem. But I also like to see myself as a translator from so-called traditional typography to CSS language, because oddly enough, new generation web designers are not that familiar with typography. But if you look at the history of typography, all these problems that we have now on the web are already solved. So they had small type because they had small books. They had poor quality paper, like we have low resolution screens. So if we just go a couple of centuries back and see the rules, their rules and their solutions to their problems, we can actually learn a lot from that. So I wouldn't say that there's web typography or responsive web typography per se. We just call it that way right now, but actually that's just typography applied to this new medium of screen. Well, for web typography and for web designers in general, I think it's super important that they know how to code. So they really must understand how CSS and HTML work, and to some extent even JavaScript. Because if you don't know how to code, you cannot actually experiment with typography. It's very hard to design in Photoshop because this is not the result that will look like the JPEG output from Photoshop or PSD output from Photoshop will not be the design the user will see in the browser. So it's super important to learn how to code, to learn CSS properties that are related to typography. There's a lot of new properties coming out in CSS3. So that's one thing, you know, learning how to code front end. And then the next step would probably be to just consult all these popular typography books like Brinkhurst, Nordzi, Hokuli, you know, watch presentations by Gary Leonidas and people who are deep into typography. And then you can actually learn these old school rules that we can apply to web design. Well, with regard to the future of web typography, the next big thing is, I mean, the next most exciting thing is probably responsive fonts. There are a couple of tests. There are actually two Alista-Part articles that explain the concept of responsive fonts. So the font files themselves will be manipulated with JavaScript or any kind of future technology to create width or weight or whatever you need, different metric or different contrast in strokes to suit your design. In my presentation, I will actually showcase two of these demos, so people will see that it's possible to manipulate SVG font files with JavaScript to bring live interpolation in the browser. And I think after that, people will we will need more type designs that will be more suitable for such manipulation, because not every typeface design is actually good for this kind of adjustments. Well, first things first, and it's not always easy. It's not like that everything is perfectly balanced. Sometimes you have to take care of your family, and then you kind of have to put professional side. You have to kind of be prepared that sometimes you'll have emergency at work and sometimes you'll have emergency at home. But I can see the connection between stepping away from the screen and the creativity, because if we only watch other people's portfolios and only talk to other designers and developers, then it's very difficult to actually communicate some complex concept when you're working for your client to a random person on the street. So it's very important to experience, to observe and experience the life outside of computers and away from the screen. So that's why I think if you have a hobby or anything that's not related to your primary job, it certainly helps to be more creative at your, at designing or developing websites. Well, last year we started using Git and Sass for all prototyping. So all the prototypes are now done with Sass and are tracked on Git. So we can have like multiple branches for prototypes, because we prototype a lot. Like just a navigation can be prototyped in 10 different ways, so you can present to clients, and they can see the differences and what are like pros and cons for every little detail. We're still pretty excited about that, the power of SaaS especially, because it allows you to prototype like crazy. Another thing is what's like continual goal is to bring responsive web design to more companies, because it's very important to kind of provide better experience for their customers. And I still feel, even though we mastered the responsive layouts and in a way, in some extent, responsive typography, we still have to figure out the responsive images and multimedia, how that falls back. A big issue is web performance. In our community, we talk a lot about that, but it's still not appreciated enough, with clients or with backend developers, and we still have a lot of work to do around that. So, and definitely, I see my goal, just evangelizing responsive web design as a whole to everyone who needs a website, because that's the future. We are still not there. It's not still a household kind of term, responsive web design, but we'll get there.